So Jim, so excited we were able to kind of jump in here. I wanted to hear more about your story and just what got you into this and what motivates you day in, day out. So I just wanted to first have you just introduce yourself. And my first question for you is, what is it that brought you to therapy? What got you into this in the first place?
Um, my first Jim, I'm Jim Martel. I run a Sebago Lake Counseling. It's been my practice. I've been doing this for about 16 years now. Getting into therapy, I came out of graduate school with a degree in theology and minors in philosophy and Greek and Latin, and started by happenstance working in human services as a direct support professional, living with a young man with disabilities with Down syndrome, and kind of started doing that for a few years in this live-in role. And then what really brought me to pursuing therapy was when my father, who was a Vietnam veteran, he actually engaged in therapy for the first time with the VA after a kind of a critical kind of crisis type situation. And kind of, he was one of those guys, 6 foot tall, John Wayne, 6'4", kind of didn't take crap from anybody kind of thing. And that was one of those things that really kind of, if he could do therapy, then I was like, then that is something that I could do.
Yep.
So that really drew me into the field and ignited certain parts of the passion for it.
Yeah, and you hit on a kind of interesting point there of some of the potential stigmas around therapy from just, sometimes in a man's perspective or in certain fields. I mean, is there anything about the way you approach therapy that you find to be welcoming, inviting, different, anything that with some of your clientele that kind of sets you apart from others or just in general your philosophy on therapy?
I think I came into the field working in coming out of while I was in graduate school, working in community mental health. So I was working as a case manager at a larger agency with the glass on the windows when you walk in the door, and waiting rooms with 70 people in them, and that type of feel. And one of those deals is that was not where I wanted to be long term. It was a way of getting my foot in the door. So, but really wanting to have my office have a vibe and a feel of, like, very homey. Like, I call my couch the guy couch. It reclines, it kicks feet out. Um, and trying to have kind of a more authentic kind of living room type feel versus an overly officey kind of feel
Yeah.
to it. And I think that's really kind of one of those pieces. And when coming into therapy, I think that's a big part for me is being able to be authentically who I am within the therapy. Um, Being able to be real with people, being able to kind of be very direct at times, but you know, kind of honing in on meeting people where they're at, but also helping to kind of say sometimes the therapist role or the counselor role is sometimes you're the counselor, sometimes you're the surrogate parent, sometimes you're the big brother figure, sometimes you're the dad figure, sometimes you're a little bit of the drill sergeant. It's a little bit of whatever is needed at the time. And I always say that I think one of the bigger parts is it's like being the Swiss Army knife for the people that you have. Whatever tool they need is we're trying to be prepared to bring that to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. You're like a consummate wearer of all hats, if you will, and just being there for whatever they need, like you just said. Talk a little bit. So you mentioned kind of where you came from to where you are now. Like, just give me the rundown of that journey. Just kind of what brought you into the private pay space. How has that transformed? Just give me kind of a timeline of everything.
I mean, it was starting off working within, I worked predominantly with state funded care. When I started my practice, I really was gung ho early on, wanting to have my own practice, not being under the thumb of an agency.
Hmm.
Um, in which case, I sort of kind of worked with one of our larger agencies as a, outside clinician for them, while getting my full licensure. And then eventually worked with insurances and brought in different panels and started working those pieces, which was fine for quite a while in the beginning. However, over the last 10 years, certain things happened. A big, tough transition point was where I didn't know if I was going to be able to, stay in counseling, was when we lost my father. Like I said, he was a veteran with PTSD. Unfortunately, he became one of the 22 veterans we lose per day, um, to veteran suicide. And we had lost my grandfather the same way. And it was either going to make or break how I was going to work and how I would work with the rest of my life in this job and in the field. So one of those pieces was when I first started doing therapy and really got into doing it on my own. I told the therapist, just try to help me to keep from becoming a lumberjack. Um, and let's see where things go from there. Because I didn't know if I was going to be able to be in this field or stay in this field.
Yeah.
And in that same process, we started a nonprofit, Operation Ray of Light,
Yeah.
which my family and I started out of our pain and the hurt and the suffering that we had, was trying to take and change it so that other veteran families would not have to go through the same process. Um, and I put a lot of time into that. And then in doing that, the passion kind of grows in that, well, I wanted my practice to be able to, supplement my ability to be able to put time into the nonprofit, in which case that was when I transitioned out of doing state funded work, going to straight insurance fully, and realizing that, okay, well, that was a little bit better than state funding. And then, eventually getting older, it's just like the transition of moving from doing a lot of children, young kid work, play
Mhm.
therapy, realizing as I get older, my tolerance for, certain things like the insurance industries, overbearing, wanting more information, the fact that I want my information with my clients to be confidential and I don't want to kowtow to, bureaucrats. That was a big part of it. And I think there's a kind of big independent streak that built in, also realizing that in order to put the time into my nonprofit, that I would need to really hone in on building this business and putting the time in, just as much time in building this business as we did, for all the free work we did putting in building the nonprofit. So a big part of coming in towards TPA was trying to have a different direction, being able to see the big picture of getting paid for what I was worth,
Hmm.
and at the same time being able to have the opportunities to, yes, work with the nonprofit, but also have the time with my family, focus in on what I wanted to do with them, and not just live a therapeutic, the world as the therapist, but also be able to hone in on making all the other areas of my life more optimized, more, really honing in on the self-care, working on taking care of being a better therapist by being a better man, being a better therapist by being a better husband, and being a better therapist by being a better business guy.
I love that. I love it. Lots to digest. First off, and again, thank you and your family for your service and all the work you're doing in the nonprofit world. Amazing. And I'm happy to we can get into more detail there. But just to hear kind of that transformation, the journey and the ability to kind of to reflect and adjust and all under the scope of just widening your ability to care for more people, including yourself, and do it as effectively as possible, I think is super, super powerful. And I've seen it. I mean, I've seen your growth even in the short time we've worked together firsthand, kind of just where the net widens and yet where the green pastures are yet to come. Kind of your whole mission, I see it happening and growing in real time. Just to kind of to take a look and to scope into the present about just some of the people and areas that you work and specialize and love doing. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of the breadth of clients you work with now? Some of the people you really love working with that definitely would, benefit from talking to you, or areas that you're really passionate about in the scope of what you do for therapy.
I mean, I really like working with couples. I think it's kind of a cool place because not only do you get the work of helping one person at a time, you get that piece of, you get a double whammy for your time. You get more time, but also helping the couple takes and helps those families. And it brings me to a place of like getting a referral call from a kid who was calling. I say a kid, it was probably adult child calling up for their parents, and they're making the phone call to initiate, and then we get the parents in and we look at how three generations are getting the benefit of doing that couples therapy. And for your younger couples that we're working with, is helping them to be more solid in their relationships so that they can be more solid for their kids. setting up better support systems there. So definitely couples is a big place where I really enjoy working.
Mhm.
At the same time, uh, trauma-based work, anxiety-based work is always something. Having to go through my own trauma, um, multi-generationally experiencing trauma, I think there's a pretty big soft spot there. But it's also developed really a passion for it.
Mhm.
Uh, Working with the veterans is a big piece because of our experience with my father and my grandfather. And I think a big part is really trying, and really a bigger part, I think, too, is that piece like the love of working with veteran families. I think
Mhm.
some of the best clients that I've worked with, some of the most profound, relationships were those with the spouses of veterans with PTSD. And I look at how, such a, like my mom being this very, loving and compassionate person that she was, and how much she cared about working with my dad and how supportive she was. And I see these families of veterans, it just kind of gets you kind of tied up on the inside. And there's just a lot of passion that comes into that for those families.
Yep.
Um, and it's kind of one of those pieces that I really enjoy. And I guess the other one is working with like teens, kids, young people that are really trying to get into whatever that next chapter of their life is. COVID did such a number on the mental health of our teenagers. And, being able to work with kids who had maybe isolated or developed so much anxiety that they couldn't go to school or they couldn't get out of their own way, and being able to help them to manifest plans and work on a micro level to build baby steps. And I think about one of my kids who, basically was 20 years old and had not been, had a job, had not had anything, and basically was one of the byproducts of COVID. And, now he's a sophomore or almost a junior in college. He's got a job that he enjoys. He's taken flights on his own to go visit family in different places. And just being able to see people move to fruition, kind of get into a place where there's like a real progress in whatever that is for a person. I think that's a
Yeah.
big piece.
Yeah, first off, thank you for that. And one of the things I noted is just the common thread in a lot of that of, you know, a lot of the areas you love to help and like help people and understand and and find and build paths forward are things in your personal life that you can tie to as well, which I think is so critical in just the ability to relate and the ability to just get the full picture and understanding, create that sense of understanding with the clients that I think is incredible. One piece, and I know this, and I know you didn't mention a second ago, but I'd love for you to get into more detail is another area which you call age optimization. And I'd love for you to give me or give us just a little bit of an idea of what is age optimization? What does an age optimization client look like? And what is it that gets you so passionate about that?
I mean, I think age optimization came out of my own experience of, um, kind of number one was going through and dealing with PTSD and depression, um, and then also physical injuries. I just tore a quadricep on a fall, and my weight went way through the roof. I was not necessarily taking good care of myself. I was still going through the motions of doing the work that I needed to do on a day end level, taking care of everybody else, but really was not doing well on taking care of myself.
Mhm.
Um, and looking at these things as at the time as a 47-year-old, 46-year-old, realizing that these were non-sustainable patterns for it, especially if I wanted to be a therapist. And part of that big part for me as a counselor is always trying to be, I'm not going to tell you to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So it came into a spot of honing in on, kind of a, working therapy. I worked with one of my counselors through a support program with the VA for people who had dealt with veteran suicide, which really helped me to gain a lot of ground there. And even seeing, working with somebody, especially as being a therapist who does therapy, the essential need for somebody to call you on your bull, and really point some things out. So that was vastly helpful, and that's a big part of it. But also really realizing and making a physical metamorphosis, taking and going into a spot where the commitment to self care. the commitment to making sure that I was getting in the gym. Part of my day built in every day is okay, I get three clients in the morning, I got three or four, sometimes whatever in the afternoon. I got 2 hours in the gym that I'm going to take and defragment the brain for the morning sessions and be ready to be in there and go at it in the afternoon fresh. And developing these life strategies so that even with, the torn quadricep that I had, or the most recent, when I had my ankle rebuilt in the spring of this year, it was making sure I'm not going to take and utilize that as an excuse. I've got to keep moving somewhere. And I do
Yeah.
have some issues with my back, with my knees, with my legs, and it's optimizing what you have and not focusing on what you do not have. Working on those areas. So if the back is not going to be happy today, we're going to work on the biceps. We're going to work on the arms. We're going to work on the chest. If I can't walk well on the treadmill today, we're going to move to the bike. We're going to find whatever we can do to optimize that opportunity to move forward. And I think it applies even into a business principle place, because really a big part of that too is optimizing your time.
Yeah.
How do I schedule my time? And you've been on the journey with me. As there's times when I get on the computer and I can go into my Jackson Pollock um, place where I have a blotch where I have a half an hour and I can hammer out, a whole new web page of all kinds of information, and just it's an optimization, looking at my time and saying I have this time here and I'm going to make the best use of this time. And we're all
Yeah.
given a certain amount of time on the planet, and one of those deals is optimizing. If I take care of myself in a good way, if I optimize myself, then it's a place where I can lead others to optimizing theirs. And I think the big part is this midlife age optimization. People get in a midlife crisis. Um, everything goes downhill from here. It's all over. And I don't think that's not the way I want to look at life. I don't think that's the way we should look at life. It's really these options and opportunities. I feel better today at 49 years old, I think honestly, than I might have felt that at 39 for sure, and I'm almost positive that I feel better, stronger. I might have more aches and pains than I did at 29, but I feel better about this, and I'm more optimistic about looking at the future. And I think that's something that it resonates with people, taking your age and not being in a spot where we're putting on, you're getting older, you have to act older.
Yeah.
And I think that's, being able to do things today that I can do, better, and helping people to really optimize where they're at. And I think that depends on everybody's physical capacity. I was 301 pounds in 2020 2021 after my injury. And,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool to be able to be in a spot and say, well, you know what, I'm down to 228 today, but I am a strong 228, and there's no quitting on it. It's just keep on going. And I think that's mental strength, physical strength. I get out, make sure that, getting people to get out there in the woods if they like to be out in the nature, being able to hone in on, even from age optimization, I think from a man place is honing in on the better aspects of connection as a whole. We're not all of us as men are as easily connected to others. And I think one of those things being learning how to be able to be a better communicator, how to be a better husband, how to be a better father, especially being a girl dad, is kind of one of those things that, honing in on that. So, and I think it really kind of also gains towards, having good knowledge too of what does midlife look like for men? What does midlife look like for women? We're dealing
Yeah.
with andropause for men, menopause for women. What are the tools that we can potentially refer people into for supports so that we can pull things together as a team and really help people to live to the fulfillment for the longest period possible?
I love that. Again, uh, it was uplifting for me to hear it. And obviously, just the fact that you've lived the optimization aspect, the one thing through line I heard in that, which really resonated, was having an empowered relationship with time. Time is going to pass one way or the other. It's how we choose to make those decisions on how to optimize it, on how to live it the best way possible, and having the resources at your disposal and having the tools mentally and physically to have that empowered relationship. I think that's so critical. And I again, I mean, it's exciting to hear you talk about it because again, I know you've lived a lot of it and want to share that with everyone else. But the kind of possibilities and the way to really rethink that midlife era specifically in that is pretty transformative. That's pretty cool,
And
Jim.
and if you think about it, it's so easy in the world that we're in to get sucked into negativity. It's very easy to get sucked in it, and I was in it. I was in a victim mentality. I think when I'm going through loss and those pieces, and I think that's one of those things. Realizing, working within, and finding your power, finding your strength, and that's the big piece of it, and that doesn't mean that we don't still get kicked down on a day in, day out. You don't get something doesn't go right on a call or whatever, but it's that ability as optimization, being physically better, being emotionally better off, mentally stronger in a certain way, that ability to take the hits and then get back up and see bigger picture. I don't know if when I was in my 20s I could see myself living into the 70s healthy and
Yeah,
strong. I mean, I can see those things going really, potentially really really well, and I think that's one of those things.
I love it. I love it. I want to shift gears just quickly and look at it, more on the business side of things, the kind of successful practice you've created and are still building. I know for me personally, one of your superpowers is just your unrelenting positivity in the face of kind of having to be agile and growing your practice and things changing, seemingly on a day-to-day basis. And on top of that, your ability to, Jim, I've known you for a short amount of time, but I feel like I've known you my whole life. That just ability to relate to people instantly. But if just looking back on your career, and I'm not saying any sort of drastic change or to do something over the other, but if you could talk to early, I just got out of, I just made the decision to get into therapy and I'm looking to grow my practice. If you could look back and talk to young Jim and give him a couple pieces of advice on how to grow the practice as effectively as possible, what would you tell him?
I mean, I think I would have honed in on growing myself first, probably. As a younger, really looking at growing myself, really honing in on good self care, really kind of honing in on those aspects would have been a big piece because it does help out so much. Um, Luckily, I was blessed early on to have some really great supervision and consultation. I've still got a consultant who was my original supervisor, and she's been with me for 16 years. Um, Having good supports, making sure you maintain good supervision. I think a
Mhm.
big part too is as a therapist is you got to have, I mean, honestly, good therapy. Being, if you're going to sell it, you better freaking do it. And I think that's a big part. My therapist will bring stuff up, that I might talk about that's going on at home, and it's like, well, you realize, you're doing therapy on your wife. Oh crap, and having those people that are going to be straight up with you and really being honest with you, and I think that's a big part. And I think too is there's so many places to get sucked into negativity. Flip on the TV and go to the news. You're going to get sucked into things. I think one of those deals is remembering to hone in on the things that are important, hone in on the clients that you have, taking care of your clients, and remembering, the more important piece is connection. Um, the value of connection, the value of being able to see the bigger picture. Um, and I mean, I guarantee you, one of those deals in mid after my dad had passed, things like that, there was a period of going through the motions, being
Mhm.
really good for my clients, doing the best that I could for them, but not doing well for me and not doing well necessarily for my family. And that's, it's there's a regret piece, but there's also a piece of honing in on being the best that I can here and now. And I think that's that authentic realization of having to, like, sometimes you got to find your head underwater to pull it out. Um, and you don't always realize how underwater you are. Um, and I think that's a big part. Really honing in on your family, if you can, that's what you do all this stuff for. If that's what you're in, and trying to make sure when you're building your practice, I think just trying to make sure you're always trying to be grounded on yourself. And I think, I mean, like I said, I feel more grounded today than any point in my life. And I think that self care component, that homed in, grounded piece, you get to see a little bit because you deal with me on a regular basis. My over anxious ADHD modes where things are flying around and ideas are just they're coming out all over the place. Um, but even in doing the exercise, doing the work, taking good care, now I've got lists and I get things down, and there's a slower process of putting things together. But it's really one of those things that's very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean I do see it, but you know what I think I see more, and I'm again blessed to have the opportunity, is just, and you mentioned it a minute ago, is unflinching authenticity. Like every piece of marketing I've seen you put together, or you know things on your website, branding, any of that is authentically you. You're not trying to be anybody other than you, which creates that complete trust and transparency between you and prospective clients. And I would say there's not a shred of entitlement on you, Jim. Like you just you own it, you take accountability, and you get things done. And I think that's one of those two things I see on just on a day-to-day basis that translate into just consistent growth and an appreciation, and back to kind of with your age optimization and everything else, just an empowered relationship with time. It's one foot in front of the other every single day. And it's not like it's always a straight line to the pathway to success, but we're still marching each day. I see it.
No,
Um,
no,
and
I was going to say my line's more of a zigzag, upside down, all over the place, kind of here, over there, and then eventually comes to somewhere. But
yeah,
uh,
yeah. So, again, it's so cool to see your journey every week, and the growth and success that you've made. You made a really good point earlier about like being a better businessman to be a better therapist, and being a better husband to be a better therapist, and kind of circling this holistic approach to your business, to your life, to your relationships, to have it all weave together. Um, my question, just to kind of end things out, is where do you see it going? What's next? What's next on the horizon for Sebago Lake and Jim?
I mean, I think a big part, we're going to be, I would imagine in the next, in first quarter next year, being pretty much 100% private pay clients. I can see there being more time for me to, by having the opportunities, because there are some things that I would like to build above and beyond for post therapy supports for individuals that they could take from my experience and really help them to enhance their lives beyond the therapy office. I think that's one of those things, realizing that, therapy and the skill set is this one tool, but not everybody is going to have that opportunity to get in with one person. And I can't do everything on my own. So one of those deals is figuring out, taking the brain trust that, between TPA brain trust, my own brain trust, pulling things together so that we can take the therapy to the next level,
Yeah.
fill that practice first, which is going to happen, and then it's just being able to really, with the free time, because I really think about the 3 to 4 hours a week that I have committed to putting in a TPA. Now I'm like, when all these things vectors are going, what the heck am I going to do with that 3 or 4 hours that I've put in? So there's going to be this free time. The website's done. Okay. There's going to be Google ads are up and running. Everything's on full cylinders. We can click this on, click this off. All right. There's going to be 3 or 4 hours of free time to develop something else bigger, better, and moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I have nothing but just excitement to see what's next on the horizon for you, Jim. And whatever it's going to be, I know you're gonna do it in a way that is authentically you, and in a way that's meant to just help as many people as possible, giving the ability for support for anybody that needs it. So, um, any final words, anything to say, and we'll wrap things up here.
Anybody who is in the program and working TPA, I think it's real easy to get caught up on the trying to do perfection. It's really easy to try to get, I've had times with certain things where you're waiting for things to come in and get really anxious about those things. There's kind of this is our business and it's our livelihood and it's our clients. But what I would say is with all of that is if you can try to hone in and maintain on a positive trajectory, see where things are going, and then maybe I think one of those deals is when you start tracking your daily client income, you start doing these different things, do some tracking so that you can see the trajectory that you're going in. And I think one of those things that's plug in, just keep plugging into the system. Um, take good care of yourself, make sure you're taking good care of yourself and keep a positive vision of yourself. And if you're struggling on that, find good people that are going to help you to get there. And I think, one of the cool things with TPA is there's been people who have been reaching out through instant messenger, kind of reaching out to me a little bit. And, there's been people that have been supportive in my process going through different things. So I think that, there's a network, utilize the network, just maintain positive and realize that, the things that you want to have within life of being a counselor or a therapist, you can have those things, and you don't have to live in poverty to have them.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jim. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Wonderful as always. And again, just look forward to seeing what's next. I can't wait. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Thank you.